Welcome to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. Each episode will tear down a myth, kick a social norm in the beanbag, gut punch a sex ed untruth, or destroy a poorly constructed relationship expectation. Get ready to unlearn all the crap you accepted as fact. Strap in for a mind-blowing revision on what sex is and what it can do. Prepare yourself for a whole new thought pattern when it comes to modern relationships. And now, here's your host, Jenny Simas, the Intimacy Ally, relationship expert and certified sex and intimacy coach.
Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to Storytime with the Intimacy Ally. It's me, Jenny Simas Leite, your Intimacy Ally, and I am joined once again today by Mr. Courtney Brame. Yay! Say hi, Courtney.
Hi, Courtney. No, I need to stop doing that. Hello, thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So we're gonna have another bonus episode here because Courtney can't stop doing cool shit. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. Recently we had Courtney on because he is the creator of Something Positive for Positive People that fights herpes stigma. All right, you don't like the word fights, right?
I was gonna let it ride, but we
Okay, all right.
minimize stigma, right?
Minimize. There we go. That's a kinder word.
And just like part of that, just so people understand, like I try not to use violent communication when talking about stigma because I think that that's one of the things that fuels it. So minimize it just means to deprioritize it and allow for it to just fall to the wayside because there's other priorities that aren't herpes or people's herpes diagnosis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So well said.
Thank you.
He has had a podcast about this since 2017. It has over 350 episodes. You should definitely check it out. I will add a link to that in the show notes. And if you are feeling like you want to help with this cause, you should definitely go over to spfpp.org and make a donation.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an awesome thing to do because you have been running this nonprofit, this 501c3 nonprofit, for 5 years now?
Yeah, it's been a nonprofit for 5 years, podcast for 7, and I want to say we've kind of like tried to do everything that appeared to be helpful. And yesterday I had my board meeting and we got some new board members. Some people left for various reasons, but we have a much more clear and concise vision for where the organization's going. So there's really two main things that we do, one of which is the podcast, which serves a number of purposes, but mainly it's the support tool for people who are living with herpes. Like a lot of times people get diagnosed, they search for information, they want to hear from other people with it. And the podcast really gives those aspects of a person who otherwise might not have even shared, like their story, talking about their diagnosis, their experiences with healthcare professionals, dating, disclosure, sex, navigating the mental health aspects of it, and how the emotions impact them. So the podcast serves a lot of those purposes, of course, in addition to the awareness. But the other thing that we do, which is more active, involved, and like behind the scenes that people don't see, is we teach medical professionals, educators, how to minimize stigma in their education, in their history taking, in their interactions with patients. So it's really locked into those two things because we were doing a lot of stuff that, not to say people didn't, want, but there wasn't a lot of expressed interest in it. And I remember doubling down on things like the research and surveys and yoga classes, support groups, various support groups and community events. And the people with herpes just wanted the podcast, right? Like I gotta say that was a thing. And when we held our virtual conference, the first one, which is still available for purchase if you want to access the recording, that's at www.spfpp.org/conferences. And you can watch that and get the survey data from the presentation as well. But a lot of healthcare professionals signed up for that. And this was supposed to be something for people with herpes to receive this information. And I was offering it for free. I was offering it for for donation amounts, and nobody was coming to those. So I just decided to try and make it an event, pay speakers, see what would happen. And it's funny because I put like a $70 price tag on it, and 120 people came. So
Yeah.
just for perspective, like people really don't value free stuff.
Yeah. Finding that out, right? Isn't it fun?
Hmm.
Oh my God. But that's not true though, because we do value the podcast.
Yes, yes, the podcast. Yes, I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah,
I don't know of anything else like it, like your podcast. I really don't. Like where people can open up about these things and feel completely safe to do that. And then to be able to attend that conference and to see the research that has been made possible by your outreach. That was like I don't I cried a little bit when you were presenting. I'm so glad we weren't on camera because finding out all the information that you had gathered. I mean, who else is doing this?
yeah. I mean, there's a number of people doing something like it. I will say I'm the only person doing it this way. There's a lot of people who, and I know how dark and unhopeful this might sound, but I really don't see there being a cure for herpes in my lifetime. I just
Mhm.
if I waited on a cure when I found out I had herpes, I'd have spent the last almost 12 years of my life waiting for a cure. And I
Right.
tell people, like, don't wait. Like, you're hoping that somebody who doesn't know you, who's dedicating their life to this and making this a priority, comes and saves you. And like, how else are you expecting or hoping to be saved? And that's kind of like my my behind the scenes. Like, I communicate it differently, but that's probably as cut and dry as it can be, is that
Mhm.
you waiting on somebody to save you. How else are you waiting on people to save you? How else is your relationship to your herpes diagnosis and stigma running your life? Because if it's not herpes, then it's something else. And oftentimes the herpes diagnosis and stigma really get to take the blame for something else that's actually going on, that's more of a pattern in a person's life. So
Mhm.
in times, and what makes this podcast so unique, the in terms of what I hear from listeners, is that it's no BS. Like, I'm not selling people a dream. I'm not like saying,
Mhm.
hey, just hold on a little bit longer. Like, my overall goal is to get people to a place where they can live with this virus, whether there's a cure or not, and be able
Mhm.
to stick around. Like, if that's something that they're hoping for, then maybe there will be something that comes along that gives more hope. But there's so many steps between now and curing herpes, and also it's not necessary to cure it, right? It's not killing people. It may mess with their mental health, it may mess with their bodies, but like, people, there's just no way of actually doing that today. And there's no way to get to that path without a better test, so that we can really see how many people have this, and
Mhm.
more um, effective medication. And more effective medication means that perhaps more people who have this will take the medication. And then, like, if medication sales go up, there's no need to cure something that medication is being sold for. And then
Like so many other things. Mhm.
there's the possibility of a vaccine. So then everybody who doesn't have herpes now is in the market for getting vaccinated, right? So that
Mhm.
they get herpes. And then we get to a point of there maybe being a cure. But
Right.
we ain't even close to any of those things. And people have been saying, we're so close to a cure, we're so close to a cure. And that doesn't align with me. So I'm kind of isolated in the work that I do, which is really supporting I used to say mental health. And the more that I really examine and look at this, it's the emotional well being of people who are living with herpes. And I can speak more about that, but I don't want to like do your podcast. You
I'm
got
just letting you go. Uh, but yeah, I do believe that the emotional health and the mental health are huge aspects. I know that I've heard you and others speak about how much better the quality of life can be when you get to a point that you can kind of get your body to cooperate with you so that you're not having as many outbreaks because stress is like the biggest thing, right? So if you can get some kind of wrapping your mind around, okay, I have this. Now, how can I exist with this? And how can I kind of make that the yin yang? rather than me fighting against having this, you know?
hmm And that's another, aspect of this. And people who listen to the podcast, they figure this out if they listen long enough. But about 5% of the conversation is about herpes, right? Like that's why we're here. This is a nonprofit. We're supporting people with herpes. People
Mm-hmm.
herpes, and here's what I learned, right? And we get to talking about parenthood. We talk about dating. We talk about relationships. We talk about communication. We talk about wellness. We talk about just day to day experiences of everyday people who just, oh, by the way, happen to have herpes. And there's so
Yep.
much to learn about yourself through stigma. I don't know if you hear this, but the phrase doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people don't really know what that means, and I think that this podcast is very uh, does a very good job of articulating what the work is and what doing the work actually means, which is you have to identify your truths. You have to untangle your truths from the lies around you, the things that don't serve you. And part of that is looking at your relationship to stigma. I challenge
Mm-hmm.
people to look at their relationship to stigma, their relationship to herpes, their relationship to sex, their relationship to relationships, their relationship to themselves. And oftentimes, when we get to a certain point, they begin to understand, like, all right, well, this actually isn't just about herpes, or this is something that is far more making this a bigger deal from us
Mm-hmm.
than it actually needs to be.
Right. Absolutely. So, on that note, let's talk about the cool thing that you got planned for next week.
Eh,
What is happening?
Literally next week. It's next. So, probably a week ago, I got the wild idea of putting together some type of a men's wellness symposium. I am a yoga practitioner. I call myself an unconventional yoga practitioner because most yoga teachers are like thin white women,
Uh-huh.
and I'm not that.
Yeah.
And so,
But a lot of them are also named Courtney. So there's that.
and we got that right. So I don't look like your typical yoga practitioner.
Not the typical New Jersey Courtney. Mm-mm.
No. And I don't even think I've been here long enough to, say New Jersey. Yeah, we got a lot of
Sorry, I'm gonna stop.
things. I'm a walking contradiction. So I'm an unconventional yoga practitioner. I've got 500 hours of teaching hours, or like I've registered learning. I registered yoga teacher, 500 hours, what it is.
Okay.
I also am enrolled in a yoga therapy program, and I want to take what I've been putting into something positive for positive people, which is that emotional support, the emotional intelligence that I've brought there. It's useful there, right? And there's ways to go about using it, but the herpes stigma really keeps it limited, and there's a ceiling on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been pointed out to me plenty of times that this is something that is necessary for the world to see and experience. And I do believe that having it limited in something positive for positive people, where, people might get the best support they've ever gotten, say that I've given them more than their therapist, say that I should be a therapist. And then
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, these aren't people going and raving about the support that they got from the organization. So it's very hard to make a significant impact on a quantitative level versus
Mm-hmm.
I see it on a qualitative level. But these are people who would never say that they reached out to me for services, because
Right.
and they kind of out themselves. So what I've had to do is just create another platform for that to be expressed. And among the Something Positive for Positive People platform, there's always been, I remember one of the statistics from the most recent survey said that 15% of people said that they know an outbreak is coming because of emotional stress. Like when they know they're under emotional stress, they're going to have an outbreak. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a yoga teacher, this is something that I've gone through, and I've incorporated that into my practice, into my teaching, into my like conversations, because yoga is not just, telling people where to put their bodies, right? It's a really
Mm-hmm.
a way of being. So I do my best to make the choice of living that. And in the conversations that I have that are supposed to be about herpes, I always take them a lot deeper. People are like, oh my God, I have herpes. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell this person I want to have sex with. And I'm like, do you even like this person? And they're uh, like, do you want a relationship? What do you want? What do you like? And so much of that isn't even about herpes. I let them sort of empty the tank of
Mm-hmm.
about herpes. And then by that point, they've said so many things that they've never been able to or felt that they were able to share with anybody, that I catch them when they're tired enough to really be open and receptive to sharing what's really going on. And so
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes what that comes down to is that I mostly speak with women. These women date emotionally immature, unaware, ignorant, or avoidant men. And
Mm-hmm.
the men that I talk to are very emotionally ignorant, immature, emotionally avoidant, or just unaware, because they don't want to deal with this. They are asking me, when is there going to be a cure? What do we need to do to make a cure happen? And it's like, hey, why do you, like, what are you even feeling? I don't know. I just want this to be over. Like, there's no ability to experience the emotions so that they can be let go and felt and then release and express, because
Mm-hmm.
do more of this emotional wellness work and research and reading and listening to people sort of with a different ear. I learned that, so much of this mental health talk, right, that is it's so earthy and grounded, and they're asking men to open up and talk more, talk about their feelings. But how can we have men talk about something that they don't have language for, right?
Right.
So
The how. Yeah.
the
And having it be demanded of them by a lot of white women, because that's who psychologists and social workers and all of that usually are. Like, it's just like back to the yoga teacher thing, kind of. So
yeah,
that's why I think it's so powerful that you're taking this on,
thank you. I appreciate
because I think that helping men have language to do these things and helping men understand that it's okay to have feelings, it, sorry that it falls on you, but is the work of men.
Yeah, it's not even okay. It's necessary. It's
Yeah.
necessary. Like, this is something that it's nature. It's nature to have emotions. And so much of the content that's online is telling men, no, you can't have emotions. Tough that shit up, swallow it, push it down. And it's literally killing us. It's manifesting as high blood pressure, stress, heart disease, all of these things that kill men a lot faster, and
Yeah.
suicide.
Suicidal ideation. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. So the inability to say, more than, we'll get logical and say, oh, this thing happened. Okay, how do you feel? I'm mad. You're not actually mad. What are you scared of? Let's talk about that fear. Because under most negative emotions, if not all, the underlying feeling is fear. And
Mhm.
men are supposed to be fearless, but in order to become fearless, you have to be able to recognize where the fear is. My body tells me I'm scared of heights. I will muscle through walking up to like high things. I'll look over ledges or shit. And no matter what, my knees do this thing where they try to keep me from going further and just bring me to the ground so that I don't
Mhm.
get too close to an edge of something. And this is something that I've become aware of since I was 19 years old, 20 maybe, and
Mhm.
I'm 35 now. And like, every chance I get, when I feel that feeling, like, I recognize what it is, I walk into it, but I didn't always have the recognition, and that made me avoid things, right? Had I
Mhm.
continued to just avoid, like, oh my God, I'm scared of heights, I'm scared of heights, or not even know that, or what would it look like if I felt like I needed to prove a point and be like, I ain't scared of shit, and then I
Mhm.
ledges and slip, fall, jump off or whatever, and boom, I'm making my way into the next lifetime.
Right?
Reset button. So I really do believe that it's important that we have language, because even in I've been to a lot of men's mental health things, and there's no conversation on emotions. I asked a question at one that I went to recently, and I was like, hey, there's a lot of talk about like mental health and, you know, I didn't get too deep into it, but I asked a very, what I thought was surface level question. I gave context, and there was silence for a good 30 seconds from four panelists. Everybody just kind of like sat at the question, like, and no one knew how to answer the question. And it was just really about emotions. Like, where do emotions play a role in this? And talk about mental health. And the more I look, like, I go to the yoga spaces, and everyone's like able to talk about, these emotions and feelings and processing it. It's like blinking to them when
Mm-hmm.
you sit in a with women, right? I work in a field that's predominantly women, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear them say words about feelings that I ain't never heard before, and that I've been so resistant to understanding or hearing because that's not for me. It's not for men. This is a woman's thing. Women feel fear. Women feel shame. Women feel pleasure, even.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to one of the symposium speakers who's going to be on Cam Fraser, and he was speaking to something that he's a sex educator for men. Or
Mm-hmm.
there's an emphasis on men's sexuality, and one of the things that he said is like how men view the word pleasure. Like, there's such a resistance to it because pleasure isn't for men. Pleasure is something that we give to women, and therefore it's associated with femininity, and therefore in direct opposition of masculinity. So if I feel pleasure, that's feminine, or that's womanly, or it's gay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these emotions, all of these perspectives that I've been able to pick up from, resisting the whole men versus women and the content that's online that says you need to treat women this way, you need to be this type of man. That doesn't apply to most people. It just
Right.
doesn't. The whole thing about like there's high value man. The high value man makes six figures, is 6 feet tall, has 6 inch dick, has six pack abs. Like, that's
Right.
what the internet says a man needs to be, and has like a lot of women. What about
Mm-hmm.
who isn't 6 foot tall? What about the man who just enjoys what he does for a living and is operating in service? What about the man who only wants a partner and doesn't want a big family and kids? Or what about the one who does, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many men who are just left out of this conversation. And, logically, okay, this is what people are saying to do. This is what's working for them. This is what might work for me. I need to try this. And in trying that, I think that some of the things that we identify as toxic masculinity is really just an expression of emotional immaturity. It's
Mm.
boy behavior. It's not being genuine, not doing the work, which is unpacking what's your truth away from what's the lies that have been thrown at you, to you, or the things that just simply don't align with you. It's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of shit in the manosphere is what it's called, that just doesn't apply to me, but like I still get a lot of I've gotten a lot of the outcomes that a lot of these men have accomplished. Like, I actually, so between, I ain't gotta go into, too much detail about like my personal experiences with that, but I've tried some of what has been shared online, and like there was a weekend I was hanging out, I was in another city, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm only going to like make statements and demands. And it was like, all right, this is where we're going. This is what we're eating. I got it. I'm paying for it. I'll order the Uber. Hand me that thing. And the women around me just like were so receptive to it. And I was like, damn, maybe there's some like truth to this, right? And
Right.
I realized that that was the leadership quality, right? Like, I learned that there was something about the leadership quality that was amplified in those moments. And right. And if you are receiving information that is maybe not coming from the best place, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you might be told 10 things, and you're told that these 10 things are always absolute, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are always absolute for a person, probably. And you might look at that and go, yo, these are terrible. These are like mean. These are sexist, misogynistic. And then you like maybe take one of those things and you apply it differently. So the don't ask for anything thing was what I
Mm-hmm.
essentially did. And it worked for me. But it didn't work because I said a certain thing. It was more so about the nature, my nature, right?
Mhm.
Me as I am, being picked up on by the people around me as somebody who can be trusted, who can be seen as a leader, who knows that I don't have any ill intention. So someone who
Mhm.
has genuine positive intention and someone who, is manipulative or self-serving, these two people can say the exact same thing and it be received and responded to completely differently with a certain level of enthusiasm and excitement and positive emotion, or with fear and the control and the manipulation, right?
Mhm.
And so I've learned that a lot of what's being said can be useful, but in the wrong applications of things, like it just doesn't work. And there's nothing that discerns that, because what works for some rich white man who wears business suits all the time and
Mhm.
doesn't want family, prioritizes business, self-serving needs, doesn't work for poor little Courtney over here, who is a black man who runs nonprofits and is actually happy with, not making six figures, who's
Mhm.
happy with, my own height and my penis size and the body that I have and the
Mhm.
relationship that I have. And I can pause there because I'll continue to go on this.
I want to ask you really quickly, when you did ask that panel about emotions, did they ever give you an answer?
No, it wasn't an answer to the question. Uh, the way they answered it was like, it's very generic. Like the emotions are, yeah, that's like part of this, and that didn't answer me because we don't have the language for the emotions. We don't
Mhm.
know that we are able to experience the emotions, and you're asking us to talk about mental health. The
Mhm.
conversations about mental health are not as helpful because a feeling can generate 10,000 thoughts, right? So
Mhm.
if we're talking about mental health, it doesn't logically make sense to talk about the 10,000 thoughts I'm having. How do we get more to the core of what said thoughts are? So if we can say, man, you know what? I went through this breakup and, I think that we're pushed to be mad. Like, oh, she cheated on me. I'm mad. I was inadequate. She left me because I didn't have enough money. I didn't have a six pack. I wasn't tall enough. My dick wasn't big and right.
Mhm.
We make it about anger. We try and force all of the emotions of men into one emotion, which is anger, which is a negative emotion. And David
Mhm.
R. Hawkins is the author of this book, Letting Go, that speaks to the anatomy of emotions. And anger is a feeling that has a lot of energy behind it. And this
Mhm.
energy can be what propels us up the emotional scale into more neutral or positive emotions, such as courage. Like you might go from being angry about a breakup to having the courage to look at the actual relationship and go,
Mhm.
huh, this is actually where we weren't compatible. This is where I might have gone wrong. That makes me feel a sense of regret. That makes me feel ashamed of myself. That makes me feel apathetic towards women. And then when you do that and you experience those emotions, you release and free up so much more of the energy, and you become more magnetic to draw in the people, the opportunities into your life that are more aligned with your truth, but that can only happen as you do the work. Doing the work is untangling your truth that is yours and what you align with away from the things that are not that. And that goes back to the herpes thing, because I think that that's where I first learned to do this. Herpes,
Mhm.
I started talking to people who have herpes and learning that, damn, a lot of this information that's out there isn't true. People who have herpes are having sex. They are having
Mhm.
relationships. They are having families. They are going on to be successful entrepreneurs and working in the medical field and have respectable jobs and have fulfilling relationships. And they talk to other people around them about their diagnosis. But
Mhm.
when you look at the media, you look at blogs and forums, people are like, I'm never telling anyone about this. It sucks. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. No, that's bullshit. And
Mhm.
I have kind of, I don't want to say like lost my patience necessarily, but I I like speaking to the positive. Like I want to use leading language and say, here's where we're working towards, not here's what I'm working against, or what I'm avoiding, or what I'm not wanting to deal with or see or hear or anything like that. So I say this as best I can. I want to open people's perspective by just putting out there, this is information that gives you the perspective of how you can choose what you want to do now that you know your herpes diagnosis. And when you have that information, it's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may not act on it right then, but when you see it, you start to see things where you're met with the opportunity to engage with that content or that philosophy or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
you can avoid it. You engage or avoid. And that's very
Right.
what the work is engaging with those truths, and you just avoid the things that aren't true. And when I found out that, like, oh, I'm still going to be able to have sex even though I have herpes, that shit did not mean anything to me anymore. And what became more important to me, though, was prioritizing that other people can have access to this information, that other people can have the option to choose, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really where our power is, right? So much stuff is just
Mm-hmm.
happening, and we have just, I think that people are generally lost in the reality that they have a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should definitely check out School of Consent if you haven't yet. Have you ever heard of them?
No, but please,
No?
is it Instagram? Is that a book or what?
Scoot over some, you're out of the picture.
Oh, I'm sorry.
um,
uh,
no, it's School of Consent, and they do the Wheel of Consent. It was started by Betty Martin, who is a chiropractor who then became a sex worker, and like just wanted to talk about all these different domains and like how you can have like a shadowy side to giving. And so she wrote this book, The Art of Giving and Receiving. And it's this whole wheel of consent, and it has all these different points on it about like when you give, when you receive. But the reason it popped in my mind right now is because they're actually coming to DC in September, so you might want to take a trip or something. Yeah, but talking about these emotions and the way that, you know, people impact each other, like that's just what made me kind of think of it when you were saying it.
yeah, I really do believe that that's where we connect. And I think that through something positive for positive people, like that's what I learned. You know, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people who come are experiencing shame. They're experiencing these negative emotions, and these are emotions that I can relate to. Like when I was first diagnosed, I experienced embarrassment. Like I didn't want to be known as a person who gave anybody herpes, and I reached out to the people, you know, that I think I might have been in contact with recently. And when I
Mm-hmm.
looked that they didn't have herpes, I was like, phew, no more.
Right.
The embarrassment went from, oh my God, I'm gonna be so embarrassed if I gave somebody herpes, to, okay, now I just might be a little embarrassed because now these are people who know that I have herpes. But
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't as important to me as it was to start, you know, looking at this and
Mm-hmm.
dealing with what was happening with me, because I'm the kind of person who, when something is brought to my attention, I have to I have to close it out. It can't
Right.
linger, because then that lingers, something else lingers, and before I know it, I got a dozen things lingering that are dictating how I live my life. And unconsciously at that, because if I've got 12 things lingering and I've got four different emotions about these things going on, when I get triggered, if there's something that activates me when I'm walking in my day to day life, like I don't know how that might express itself. I may
Mm-hmm.
overdrink. I may indulge in drugs. I may do some harmful behavior, whether to somebody else or myself, because of not being aware of that. And I have so much just clarity and psychological and mental and emotional and like intuitive freedom, that
Mm-hmm.
that's why I can create something positive for positive people, create this program. This self is what it's called, the Emotional Wellness Resources for Men.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can get into like the backstory of that.
Yeah, that would be great. I do want to ask you though, like when you're thinking about how the only emotion that has been available for men, you know, regularly is anger. And when you're talking people through like these breakups, like having to also tell them or like help them see like it's not just you. Like there was this whole other person who has their own emotions and backgrounds and all of that happening. I feel like when I've worked with men who are coming out of relationship, that's very hard. They're like, no, I did this. I yelled too much, or I couldn't deliver. I couldn't make her come enough, blah, 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 blah. You know, all of these things. And I'm like, hey, you were not alone. Like you weren't there by yourself. There was this whole other person, and you've got to allow for that other person to like share in the responsibility a little bit. And I feel like a lot of men just like they just take it all on.
And that's a man's thing to have accountability. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I say that because
As some men,
yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
some men.
you can say that, but like the sense of self responsibility, like that is a fundamental structure of the code that when we look at healthy role models, like that's what it is. We
Mm,
see this in our real life, and I've always said this: like reality TV is faker to me than cartoons are. And fortunately, I guess, like I've watched a lot of anime and cartoons, and those men, even those like the teenagers that are becoming men, you
mm-hmm,
see the growth and the evolution of them turning into those things because of that accountability, right? And
mm-hmm,
the accountability can be on an extreme, of course, because it genuinely cannot be their fault, but you hear how they justify it. The ones who have this emotional maturity are able to say what is, in fact, their responsibility, and they may even show something that was so deep under the surface that no one would have noticed except them, and they
mm-hmm,
have the language to communicate it, right? So
mm-hmm,
I think back to, so many of the superhero shows that I've watched and the anime, and a lot of this stuff is different on the big screen, and unfortunately it does perpetuate these negative stereotypes of men who have emotions or who incorporate their emotions into logic. We see Captain America, Iron Man, right? These are some of the most emotional people, but they're making very logical decisions on the surface. But their
mm-hmm.
logic is still fueled by their emotions, whether that be love. Like we look at men who express emotions of sadness, right, or loss or anger, right, and the their response to a thing that should be one emotion seems like it's coming from a place of anger because there's not the language isn't there for what else it could be.
Mm.
Dark. He most of what he did was for Pepper Potts, his love. Captain America, he did what he did because he loved America, but even underneath that, he had a
Loved Agent
personal,
Carter.
right? And you
Right.
saw that, like you see that these men will do almost anything for love, and here are expressions, but we don't see demonstrations of men who are pursuing their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What that journey reveals to people because it's a journey that anybody can relate to. I don't have an armored suit. I don't have superhuman strength. I don't have a shield, right? I don't carry
Mm-hmm.
a sword, right? So a lot of my role models, I had to incorporate these intangible aspects of their identities and their character traits into my being in order for me to be like these people, right?
Mm.
Looks like
Mm-hmm.
being able to, because they often have flashbacks, and these flashbacks are like, here was a traumatic experience that happened to me that is kind of why I'm a dick. I probably should stop being a dick. This person was
Right.
to me and made me realize that I was being a dick to them. I need to apologize to that person. And they come out of this and they have this like new strength, new power, new skill, and they're stronger, they're better, they're able to more, get to the next level of achieving what their purpose is, the thing that
Mm-hmm.
they do, the thing that they fail at, the thing that they get knocked down from, they're able to do more of when they tap into, they see that trauma, recognize that, oh, this trauma thing has been triggering me, and
Mm-hmm.
heal it. There's a whole new set of being for them. And that's really
Right.
what doing the work has been for me. And circling back to the accountability thing, like that's the code. And it's almost like
Right.
right there in plain sight. But if you're looking where it is and should be most accessible, we don't have those role models. We don't have those examples. But when you intuitively and you start to just like identify where you feel things resonate for you, because like for me, like I get this shock through my nervous system whenever like some heroic thing happens, or when something like that happens, or if there's like a character's awakening, right? And
Mhm.
you can tell I really like anime, like, but that's where a lot of how I am came from.
Mhm.
And I appreciate the mental health conversations because they give me grounded language where, I look at emotions like emotions are the reality expression of the spirit, and we use the mental health, which is like grounded, everyone can look at and say this sequence of words to explain the thing. The emotions
Mhm.
are those two things combined, your mental health and spiritual health, and this is the communication of what's happening, in us.
Mhm.
I don't know if I answered.
You did. You
Okay.
did. All right. So since we hit there, I want to jump right in and start talking about this emotional or men's emotional wellness symposium. Because one, I kept calling it a mental health symposium,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now I can see that it is different,
Mhm.
and that it's a very important distinction. So I want to talk about it, how it started, and then we'll get into like the guest that you're having and what you want to accomplish with it.
Ooh, all right. Okay. Uh, I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. I started this podcast called Self in 2020. And this podcast was sort of me processing. This is when I started therapy. I was processing my therapy sessions. Like, me and my therapist, we talk and we would just talk about things that happen, right? And it wasn't really about emotions. It was just what happened. All right, well, why do you think that happened? There was a lot of stuff was very thought driven. And when I went to the podcast, I thought that was really where the healing was happening, because it was sort of like my journal. Like, I'm out loud journaling. Like, hey, people don't really tell you what the work is or how to do the work. What they do is they just tell you to do it. There's no how
Hmm.
instruction guide.
It's
So
different for everyone. You
it
just do
really
it.
it really is, right? And
Hmm.
so I would do this thing where I used to journal. I'd be like, this happened. Like, like, damn, I'm sad. Like, why am I sad? Why did this thing happen? And I'm asking, why did things happen? And I started to, in talking or in writing,
Hmm.
things were coming out that otherwise wouldn't have if I just sat and thought about it, because I get distracted. I pull out my phone, start scrolling or something. But during 2020, I also had a lot of free time to
No
do,
way.
right?
Sorry.
uh, I was doing that for a while, and like, I'd process things like, miscommunications, issues that I've had with past partners, my career, what I was doing with my nonprofit. A lot of these things were being processed there, and I was like, damn, this feels good. And then I stopped. I stopped for a while. I think I graduated therapy,
Hmm.
and just wanted to apply a lot of this stuff that I'm supposed to be learning, this language and everything, to myself. And so I went on, and like, I just was living life. I remember I went to a men's wellness symposium, and it was for Black men. And so there
Hmm.
were two panels. The first panel, beautiful. Men spoke about vulnerability. They were crying. We talked about suicide, fatherhood, talked about, being single parent. It was lovely. There was
Mm.
a break, and then there was a transition, and the host changed. The host was probably about a mid 50s Black man who was in church.
Hmm.
He, like, apparently the conversation wasn't supposed to start the way he started it, but he went, all right, we talked about vulnerability. Now let's talk about masculinity. And the conversation,
Oh, ouch.
yeah,
Oh, because one can't do it the other.
exactly,
Oh,
right? So
ouch.
you beat me to it. So
Damn it.
the way
Sorry.
this panel turned out, no, I'm sorry. The way this panel turned out was, the conversation about masculinity was, what is masculinity? Oh, masculinity is not femininity. Oh, what does it mean to be a man? Oh, being a man is not being a man. And the way that they spoke, you could see in the room, because there were some, like, I was sitting next to someone who, was bigger, like taller than me, more like stature, but you can kind of tell, by looking at someone, that maybe I should question, what their pronouns are, something like that. And
Hmm.
ended up being a queer person, non-binary person who,
Hmm.
I don't know if they just thought that all men were there, but there were also women there. But there were people of different identities and orientations there that I remember when he said, I love everybody because God told me I'm supposed to love everybody. And that stung, that stabbed me, because like, you're clearly saying, oh no, I don't love you, but I love you because God says it. I'm supposed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the way that felt was terrible.
Like so disingenuous.
Very, and it was just super
Mm.
invalidating. And fortunately, there was a queer woman there who was one of the like coordinators, and she just came over and like gave him some presents. The guy who founded the organization, he like came over and like supported, and you could see it in his face. I heard him talking to his wife. He was like, "Why the fuck are they doing this right now?" And I was sitting there. I had my laptop out, and I wrote one note, and it was masculinity through a lens of vulnerability, not in relation to femininity. And that stuck with me. This was in 2022, early 2022. This was something that really stuck with me. And I started to just continue to have conversations and go to these kinds of things. And there weren't these conversations, right? Like we keep talking about manliness and masculinity. And a lot of what you would see is that they say that masculinity and femininity are not supposed to coexist. But if you look
Mm-hmm.
yin yang and philosophy, like everything has some of everything of its opposite, if you will, in it, right? And
For balance. Yeah.
exactly, like masculine and feminine are two like aspects of the divine, if you will. And even in that seeming separation, right? If we look at these two opposites, like they come from the same place. And one of the thoughts that I had was, okay, masculine, feminine, if we look at it in this binary way, like a man and a woman, they come together and they can make babies, make new life, right? So this is like the peak of the power of man, woman, masculinity, femininity is that. What's the core of that? It's
Mm-hmm.
so what happens when like any masculine, any feminine by that logic can create like with no intention, none of that. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens if that masculine, goes on its own journey of growth and development through that lens of vulnerability, comes back more aware of its own internal femininity too, and the feminine goes off, does the same thing and does its work and comes back to reconnect. What if you can't make babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
That power to create because of this two evolved balances coming together. And this is where we get civilizations, we get art, we get societies, we get new value systems. We the creation is just magical. And maybe, if that's what they want, babies, right? Like whole society. But I thought about it at just like the most simplistic level. And in doing that, I realized like, wow, what would it look like for people to see it, at this level? But we can't just jump there. Like to me, that's simple. To somebody else, it may be super complex.
Right.
It was a matter of like creating the steps, right? The bridge. In the example of, I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago when I started this. There was my own like thought process. I'm held to a significantly higher standard by my peers who see me now as a Black man in this space because they don't know who I was 7 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
had homophobic, sexist, whatever types of thoughts and discomforts that, again, when you begin to unpack what's true, what's my truth versus what's not true, you
Mm-hmm.
start to become more aligned. And that healing is where we begin the process of getting to where I am now. So I want to impact the men because the so much of what I see from people as being the problem is men who are emotionally ignorant, unavailable, avoidant, unintelligent, right? These
Mm-hmm.
are the main issues that if you get to the core of them simply, that's what most people who date men complain about with men. And the men that I've spoken to, those are what I see, right? There's an unwillingness to
Yep.
deal with emotion, so an ignorance, right? So how do we address the ignorance? How do we address the awareness or the unawareness? How do we address the avoidance? How do we address
Right.
the immaturity? And then from there, we start to see people shift into availability. So that's 4 steps before we can even get to a place where we can start talking to men about making change, right? I view a high value man as an emotionally intelligent man. I
Mm-hmm.
all of my friends, I play sports, and the people that I'm still friends with, there have been significant change, and I can't wait to start having these conversations with them on the podcast to talk about, like, hey, we were emotionally unintelligent. Like, what is that to you now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does being a husband mean to you? And we don't see that. Like, we hear about men who are in the dating pool because the women who are dating these men are like just blasting them and giving this impression that that's who these men are. My
Mm-hmm.
friends ain't on dating sites, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we will never hear from the experiences of these emotionally intelligent men, these eligible bachelors, if you will, the same way that people who have herpes and they're okay and they're living their life don't come on to something positive for positive people to find resources or to share their stories because they don't need to. What incentive
Mm-hmm.
do they have if they're living their life in the way that they want to be living their life? Why would they go and seek out some support for doing what they're already doing? Why would
Right.
they go and seek out a platform where in their world it's like, oh, isn't everybody like this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody takes care of their wife. Everybody goes to work. Everybody, takes care of their family, shows up and does.
Everybody checks in with themselves and makes sure that they're remaining level and balanced and doing the things that they need to for them so that they can exist and show up as the best version of themselves. Of course. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So um that with so much, let me do this and let
Well,
me
wait, really quick before you do that, and don't lose your train of thought. Think about it. Get it locked in. I do want to say, like, there's so many people who I have encountered who will not get the mental health help. Will not because of these things, because the emotional availability, because it has been ingrained, like mental health help, counseling, talk therapy, whatever. That means you're sick. That means you're fucking crazy. I can't do that. I'm not gonna do that. And it's weak. It's fucking weak. That's women shit. I'm not gonna do that. Right. So having these steps could actually get some people who need that help in that fucking door. There's
yeah.
also that.
Yeah, and I hate that, like, you got to have degrees and shit to be listened to, but like, what about the experience? This is me talking about 7 years of consistently hearing this from a population. It changed
Mm-hmm.
when I ask somebody who's not in my field, like, hey, what do you think about this? Right. And they're like, oh, damn, I never thought about that. Right. And I've been taught the same thing with herpes for all these years. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people don't care to listen to me, I guess. I don't know if it's because of the lack of letters behind my name or what, but I have
It's the worst.
a
It's so gatekeepy. It's fucking terrible.
yeah, and I'm very fortunate for people like you who are lending your platform for people who, have the experience. Like, I think that there is an absence of or lack of experience-based educational resources. So I want to interview men who demonstrate this emotional availability, this emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
emotional maturity, right? Because again, there's steps, and how you spoke to men not getting the help. It logically, if we're talking about a logical man, it does not make sense to talk about my mental health because I'm not doing anything. I
Mm-hmm.
need to get results. I need to see things. I need to see change. I need to see progress. And what does talking about something that I don't have language for, that I don't know exists, what does that do for me?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to first, offer the language, offer the benefits. What are the benefits of emotional wellness? You actually don't have to go to the doctor. And we can begin to tap into this. There's an undercurrent of everything that is emotion. So your emotional state is communicating for you things
Mm-hmm.
you may never say, you may never have to say, you might say and are either validated or invalidated by your emotional state. Like, there's a world that men just don't have access to, and I'm so fortunate for books that exist out there, such as Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. Like, I tell
Mm-hmm.
everybody about this book. And one of the things that I want to do with the men's emotional wellness resources is to maybe create like a program, an accountability program to read these books, do these exercises, practice these techniques, and
Mm-hmm.
it works for you, make a donation. Because self is it's getself.org. Get
Okay.
like SELFED.org. And I'm making this a nonprofit because I do believe that, you know, a lot of this should be accessible and available to everybody. I'm also on this nonprofit kick. As much as I've been playing making any money, it's
Mm-hmm.
so I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
To be said for that. So I'm in the process of creating like this archive of like me being able to speak to the anatomy of emotions, to incorporate my yoga practice into the emotional wellness resources. And unfortunate, like I think more than anything, what I'm doing is making this easier on the women who date men. So
Fuck yeah.
and like they don't have to do all of the work, but they can like take the horse to the water. They may not be able to
Mm-hmm.
make them drink, but they can influence, you know, the putting the water into their perspective. Like even
Yeah.
this symposium, there's mostly women names that are registered for the symposium.
Really?
Yeah. And
Okay.
uh,
I wasn't ready for that.
I know, right? So it's I think that the value of this is demonstrating, you know, what that looks like for people who date men. I was telling somebody I went to a mixer
Mm-hmm.
yesterday and I explained the symposium and she was like, "Oh my God, can I meet a man there? Like, I'm coming to that." And it's like, well, maybe I could collect some emails and, you know, be like, "Hey, we got profile of the week. Here's this person. They like these things, right?" Um,
Right.
and a lot of us, we just don't realize the power of that. There is so much power in having that emotional intelligence. And I've learned I feel late to the game. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully young men who, you know, are receptive to something different are willing to take a yoga class, read a book, a self-help book of some sort, do more than like, you know, just go and listen to the podcast or the loudest voices in the here's what men need to be doing space, because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't serve anybody. And I think that the quickest way to changing with a lot of the societal issues that we have is to bring more emotional awareness and intelligence into the men who are, you know, we as much as we may want to fight this, like the world is, it's a man's world. And so
Right.
we can bring some emotional intelligence into that. We can't have conversations about what it looks like for this to be more equitable, or more like for that power to actually be more evenly distributed among other beings, people, sexes, races, all of that. So
Right.
I genuinely believe that through teaching people to recognize and identify these emotionally intelligent men, they become the priority more so than the men that people have generally been attracted to, and giving them what they want. You stop giving men what they want, they start to look and go, wait, what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I not getting laid? Why am I not getting money? What's going on? And then
Right.
start to see where people are migrating towards. What's so attractive about that punk ass dude? Oh, he's a bitch. He talks about his feelings. Well, yeah, he talks about his feelings. Oh, wait, that's what's hot in the streets right now, talking about my feelings. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can do a lot of push-ups. No, that doesn't work today. We're not fighting bears and wolves and shit like that. Like, we're literally
Right.
navigating social structures where we have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to pick up on subtle cues. We have to be able to tap into our intuition, our inner wisdom. And the way that we do that is through our emotions, and then being able to talk about what we're experiencing and experience those emotions. We may not even have to talk about it. One of the things I love about David R. Hawkins' book, Letting Go, is the emotions are, he puts it very simple. The emotions are there to be experienced. You might not even
Mm-hmm.
have to express them, but we got to stop repressing them. And so many men do that because this is what we're taught to do. Don't
Yeah.
don't do anything. Don't have
Stuff it
emotion.
down. Bottle it up. Stuff it down. Bottle it up.
Hmm.
That's the way to be a man, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, you know, there are so many different angles coming at this now. There's, you know, there's you doing this. Like Kendra. Kendra does work with this, Kendra Holiday.
Yeah, yeah. Kendra's
Yeah.
been so supportive of me since I started my podcast, my non.
That's so good.
I'm from St. Louis, and
Mm-hmm.
Kendra in St. Louis and runs Sex Positive runs Sex Positive St. Louis. And
Mm-hmm.
that was how I found her. And even since day one, she's given me platforms to speak at. She's made
Mm-hmm.
donations. She's worn the t-shirts that I had. Like, Kendra's just been a lovely person to work with. She also registered for the symposium as well.
Nice. Yay. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different angles. So let's talk about, if you have time still, because I know we're coming up on an hour. Are you good?
I should be good, yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the guest that you have lined up. Now, Jeremy, how do you say his last name?
Jeremy
Hurt.
Hurt.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like Herte or whatever, but it's Hurt.
Hurt.
Okay. All
So
right. So he's got Let's Talk Bruh, the podcast. So let's talk about Jeremy.
yeah, so Jeremy is the podcast host of Let's Talk Bruh. This is a podcast on Black masculinity. And I think I found the podcast in 2020 during the pandemic and got connected with the group that he created. He cultivated this community of Black men who were having conversations that I didn't think Black men were having.
Right.
I reached out to him to be a part of the symposium because he is somebody that has demonstrated this emotional intelligence, or at least curiosity, with the interviews and the guests that he's had on and the topics of conversation that are important for men to be having. And so,
Right.
a man, a leader among other men, especially Black men, I wanted to bring his voice on and give him a platform to uplift some of the work that he's done. So, I'm going to be speaking to him about that work. Next, we have Teddy the comedian, and he is a comedian, and he's also a mental health advocate, especially for men. He's
Mm-hmm.
very unique life experiences, talking about being adopted. He makes a joke about his mom selling him for crack. He
Oh,
talks
shit.
about suicide ideation, depression,
Uh-huh.
some of the things that came with his breakup that he had. So that conversation is going to be more experience based on his personal experience. And then we've got Dox Diggla, who is the Brick City Buddha. He's one of the first other Black men that I've seen in a yoga setting, attire. And I love a lot of his content because he speaks about relationships. And
Mm-hmm.
his Twitter handle is the former fuckboy or something like that. So I told him, like, I want to talk about this, like, the evolution of an emotionally intelligent, emotionally available man, because
Mm-hmm.
what a fuckboy behavior, as we talked about, being like immature, toxic stuff. We have seen that, and now for us to get to this place, like, I want to talk to the people who might be at that immature setting. So
Mm-hmm.
use those experiences to resonate with the people who might be at that place, or at least for the symposium, the way it's looking for the women to be able to recognize where a man has potential. Like, what does it mean to say he has potential? Is this someone that you're waiting on to completely change? Or that's a side conversation, but that's what we'll be talking about. And then we've got Cam Fraser, who's a
Mm-hmm.
men's sex educator. He and I are going to really talk about shame in men and pleasure for men.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spectrum, and a lot of the in between stuff is like how men don't view pleasure as for themselves because they view it as a feminine thing or something that they give to a partner or to a woman. And really, what it is that most men seek is gratification through sex and
Mm-hmm.
partner orgasm. It's like, yeah, I did it. And that's like where the pleasure comes from. But we never call it pleasure. It's really gratification. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we've got some really good topics. Each speaker is going to be on for about 75 minutes. It's essentially 4 75-minute podcasts that are live and available for purchase of tickets. You can go to spfpp.org/events in order to get the full description, layout of what the day is going to look like, and then register. One thing that I want to point out is that this is going to be a symposium of men by men for men. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned women have signed up and registered. Great. You can write in for topic requests, but at the symposium, we are only going to have the voices of the men that are going to be heard, that are going to be speaking, that are going to be sharing. And I think that that's important to distinguish that intentionality there, because I don't want people like, man, why? They're sexist. They're not answering our questions. No, this is an intentional space for these men to talk and be heard, because somebody might hear something that is triggering, and not
Mm-hmm.
having to sit with that and hear like the intention of what's being said. Like I mentioned,
Right.
two completely different people can say the exact same thing, and it triggers a feeling, but until you are connected with that person's intention, you may not know that this is actually for your own good.
Right. And is it more like cis het men that you're looking to hit with this, or does that matter?
Thank you for that question. I don't think I need to say that.
Okay.
Really the intention thing, but the other part is that I've connected with trans men who they don't want to be seen as trans men, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's men. It's very invalidating for me to say this is inclusive to trans men when
Okay.
these are people whose identities are like, oh, I'm
Men.
a man,
Yeah.
right? So that's one part of it. And then the other part of that too is um, there's this idea of inclusivity being and becoming so inclusive that it is not, that it's exclusionary to the people that it's supposed to be for.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, if hold on, oh, there we go, 7 years ago, if you invited Courtney to a men's wellness symposium and you put trans, queer, inclusive, I would be like, I don't go to that shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
To highlight and spotlight that, it's really essentially saying like, all right, we want more of, it's very people pleasing to me
Mm-hmm.
because language doesn't apply to the audience that is 4 or 5 steps back from where I am today in order for me to get them on the trajectory of taking that next step up. The
Absolutely.
language is it's a tricky thing to like navigate and talk about. So I
It
appreciate.
really is. And I'm sorry if it was a question that was like out of left field. I hope not.
Dude, that wasn't out of left field.
Okay.
100% something that I like plan on having to address because
Mm-hmm.
my platform that I've started to talk about this on is in the sex education field, which is like where I speak about being held to these higher standards for language, inclusivity, and the gender stuff, and like
Mm-hmm.
all of these words and
All
things,
of these things that, yes, if you are not in this field, it's very like,
jargon,
what are you doing? Like, yeah, God, that's a little weird.
yeah,
Ugh.
it's the
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
already, even when talking to men, people want men to be here who are
Mhm.
here, who don't have the here, 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 here. And for those who can't see, like I'm putting one hand up high, one hand down low, and creating steps upwards towards where people expect and want men to be like yesterday, but they haven't been given the first step, second step, third step in order to
Right.
start that process of doing the work. So this symposium serves as hopefully something that will be able to accomplish that for the people who attend, who see it. Yeah.
It sounds like it could be like the first, the third, or the sixth step, you know? It just depends on where that person is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Whew. Oh my goodness. Courtney, see? Such cool shit. Look at all the cool shit you're doing.
Thank you.
Whoosh. And I want to just thank you for sharing about your own personal journey on this and like how it played into it. I didn't even know that Get Self.org was a thing or that you were creating that as a thing.
Just
Okay.
just happened. Yeah. So
Okay.
Self was a podcast. I didn't know what I would do with it. Self was
Hmm.
just a podcast, and it was my journal. Like it was my vocal journal. I like talking. I was at a point where I thought I was going to run out of interview guests for the Something Positive podcast, and I wanted to talk
Right.
that didn't fit. Like it's not about herpes. It's about these other things. And that's
Hmm.
why self became what it became. And now like, it was actually my girlfriend who came to me one day and she's like, hey, why don't you work with men? Like a lot of the work that men need is coming like through you, through their partners who reach out. And
Hmm.
I was like, sat with that. And then like I had all these, like I said, when the the doing the work, right? So she gave me a task essentially, and doing the work looked like, okay, what's the truth in this, and what's not the
Hmm.
truth in this? And the truth was like, I already work with men, I just do it through women. So like, why not go directly there and not, you know, the 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 challenges and the obstacles that came after that too were just more and more validating that there needed to be something like
Hmm.
that was created for men, because like a lot of what I do isn't attractive to men. I'm speaking to women, I'm speaking with women. It's a lot of things that are way up here on this high level that
Mm-hmm.
I need to go back down a few steps in order to connect with the kinds of men who would be at a place to begin the progression to this level, if you will.
Right. Yeah, I'm fucking delighted because I think that there needs to be more penis havers out here talking to the men. Like, if you present as a man, like, you need to have someone who has done this, who has walked through this, and then can say, look, these are the things that help me understand that this wasn't acceptable anymore. Like, the status quo, I'm done with it. Like, I don't want to be this anymore. And there's so much more to me than what you are allowing me to show that I need to break through that. I think that's fucking fantastic.
And I do hope to just give that permission to men to have their own space, to be able to just like be in stillness and silence and be able to just say that, like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't apply to me. This isn't what I want to do. I don't want to do manual labor. I remember I used to put floors in with my dad. And I remember one day I asked him, I was like, what does he do? It was a white man standing up. He had on a collar shirt tucked in. He was clean. He was like, oh, that's he makes the blueprints or something. I forget,
Mm-hmm.
but I learned that he made a lot more money than I did crawling around on the floor. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing this shit. Like, I'm not gonna do this. No. Opportunity, like that's something I can do. I can get more money, not hurt my knee.
Not breaking my back, not aging myself by the time I'm 20. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the awakening moment that I had, that I knew I wasn't doing manual labor. And I was 16 when I was like able to go to his job with him. Because we
Mm-hmm.
do put floors in like on the side, and it was just like I'm filling up buckets of water and stuff. But when I got there, I was like, what the fuck is this shit? No.
Right.
That was my motivation to go to college. My second motivation to go to college. Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that people need to see, okay, there's this, you have this expression of repressing your emotions, just going about your doing things that you're supposed to do because people tell you're supposed to do it. Or you can challenge that shit. Like, no, what do I want to do? You know
Mm-hmm.
what? I want to make art. You know what I want to do? I want to sculpt, I want to cut grass.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I want to write a book. Maybe I want to do something else. And the only way to really do that is to have sort of those awakening moments of
Mm-hmm.
the steps. Like, right, my early steps were anime. My more recent steps were yoga, and more of the self-help books, podcasts, and just having these demonstrations of what it looks like when a man is able to be in tune with his emotions and what that does not only for himself but also the people around him.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll bet your girlfriend really likes that. Just, no joke.
Shake her head. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. She wouldn't have to come to one of my groups and be like, I don't know how to date these motherfuckers. I don't know what's going on. So
Um,
there's that,
yeah,
and like I said, this is the work of men. It's the work of men. And I'm so happy that
thank,
you're one of the men doing it.
thank you. I appreciate that. And like, I just don't know how some things are going to be received because, like I said, I have to go back and I
Hmm.
get the people who are at the lands that I've left. And I hate to say, I don't mean like I'm talking about Black people. I'm talking about like psychologically where I was 7 years ago is where a lot of people are today, right?
Hmm.
Even be further back than that. But we can't leave, where we're from and get to this new psychological space and then make the accessibility isn't just about like steps, right? Walking
Right.
steps, having an elevator, right? It's also psychological. So the psychological accessibility needs to be there, and it's not, right?
Hmm.
People talk about inclusivity. That inclusivity doesn't speak to the psychological accessibility. So if I didn't find out that journeyman, that's what he was, the journeyman. No, wait, that's what my dad was. Sorry. The role of this man who
Was he like the architect or the foreman or something?
foreman.
Foreman? Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
I used my first big job was Tricon Construction, being like a office manager. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So like if I wasn't as a, studying to be a journeyman, if I didn't
Hmm.
know foreman existed, right, I'd have been stuck on that path of journeyman. And
Hmm.
it took for me to become aware, and that was the accessibility thing. It became more accessible when I could go to my dad's job and see, oh, this is what my options are. That
Mm-hmm.
I choose that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, Courtney. All right. Real quick, run down with me
Yes.
time, dates, and how to get tickets for the symposium.
The symposium is June 30th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be interviewing these 4 gentlemen. We'll have a couple of breaks in between for me to rest my voice, get water, snacks, and things like that, unlike the which was nonstop. But yeah, it's June 30th. You can expect to hear from some of what I've perceived as some very emotionally communicative men at the very least. But I do view these men to the highest regard of being good demonstrations of emotionally intelligent. I'm paying all of the speakers. We're selling tickets. Tickets right now are $35. I'm going to extend the early bird through Friday so that people have time to, if they're hearing this podcast, they'll be able to purchase tickets for that price. 20% of what we bring in honor of Pride Month and Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, we're going to send to 2 nonprofit organizations that,
Nice.
yeah, I'm going to do something, right?
Mhm.
We're going to give the 2 nonprofit organizations, and I want to shout out Black Men's Wellness, Black Men's Black Men's
I'll
Wellness.
get it right in the show notes. It's fine.
Thank you. Black Men's Wellness in Portland, Oregon. They gave us a sponsorship. They helped us with being able to pay some of our speaker fees. So I want to shout them out. And that was actually like where I heard the symposium that I was telling you about, where the conversation went a little sideways.
Okay.
Reached out to him. I told him, I was like, hey, you remember that thing y'all did? Like, I'm doing something that I hope is like, you know, similar, but not all the way. And he's very, very supportive. The guy, he's from St. Louis as well. So we connected off of that. But yeah, that's coming up. And then I think that's probably, we can leave it there. And
Okay.
if,
But always, spfpp.org,
yeah,
something positive for positive people
yeah, /events for
/ events.
event.
Okay.
And this is also the transition from these resources, this content being at something positive. It's shifting to getself.org.
Okay.
This is when we have the symposium. That's where I'll make the announcement, because I will have the website more functional than it is now, and people will be able to come there and know what they're going to get when they get there.
All right. Wow. Whoa. All right, Courtney. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me take up some of your time and like a snap of the fingers so that I could get this out there.
Yeah,
Um,
appreciate you being willing to put this out too.
oh, fuck yeah. I always appreciate it. And I'm excited for this. I want to hear how it goes. If I can manage it with childcare or whatnot, I'm gonna snap up one of those tickets, and I'm gonna understand that you're looking to talk to men
Yeah,
and you want to and I would like to persuade, any vulva havers that jump on this thing, let them take up space. Let them take up the space. I know that sounds weird if you're a chick, like you're like, but they take up all the space. No, 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 no. In this situation where they are talking about emotions, for fuck's sake, let them take up the space.
thank
All right. Well, thank you, my lovelies, for listening to this episode, this big old bonus episode of Storytime with the Intimacy Ally, where we say fuck no to the status quo. Mwah. Bye, my lovelies.